Hi, and welcome to AmalgamNation presents World of Fictioncraft, the Northrend Chronicles, Chapter 4, Reunited. Before I get started on reading this chapter for you, I just want to apologize for any high-pitched whining. I'm not sure if it gets through to you guys who listen to these things, but I can hear it when I listen to them, so I'm not sure if it's my microphone picking up a high-pitched whine or my headset making up a high-pitched whine. But in case it is the microphone causing the problem, I want to apologize as I'm unable to edit out that high-pitched whine as it does not appear in other editing softwares. So, on with the show, as they say. One day after the battle for Light's Hope Chapel. Night time. It was night, cold and damp in the plague lands. How aptly named they were. Captain Firesworn had checked on the healers' tents, noting the two on duty drinking cups of bland tea, taken note of supplies, done the same with the kitchen, and had moved on to the recently set up forges. For all that war was bloody, the administration also needs doing. And given the chaos of the newly made camp, they had to make sure they could support the current populace. He had sent a soldier to check the church, and he had reported back that it was emptied. He was only a little surprised. Walden had passed him on his rounds and reported that he too had went to see the girl, but found the church and was no longer occupied. Claiming boredom, the rogue followed Rindon around, trying to unnecessarily scare people unused to working alongside Forsaken. There were still a few up at this time of night, sitting around campfires on boxes, crates, and other makeshift seats. Some laughed and joked, others were more sombre, mourning their losses from the attack, cradling their wounds. The roster was still unfinished, a few names missing and unaccounted for. Limbs were occasionally found while clearing the local area during reconnaissance, but who they belonged to was a mystery. Oh, by the way, it's vows of chastity, and they are normally taken by the brotherhoods and sisterhoods, not Argent Dawn paladins, Rindon recited. Walden cocked his skull curiously. What in the name of the lady are you talking about, man? You said I took vows of charity in relation to the meeting of the young Death Knight, and I am now correcting you, he stated matter-of-factly. He marked off some more supplies, flipping through a couple of pages to total his numbers. Walden shook his head. You're such a nitpicker. Bloody paladins. Walden kicked a stone into a pile of broken armour, the resulting clatter startling nearby people. By the way, you said the executions are tomorrow? Aye, the service is tomorrow after breakfast, and then the executions are to be privately held in the noxious glade following. He ticked off another crate of goods and marked what needed restocking. He frowned. These tallies were lower than he'd like. A few higher-ups from both groups are to attend. Yourself included. The Baron was a gossipmonger and usually found out one way or another what was going on. Knowing this, Rindon just felt it best to tell the former man up straight. No, I'm going to be seeing to the aftermath of the cremations, and blessings will be led by the good Father Timir. He checked off another sack of goods and moved on to the next, undead in tow. Rindon slowly rotated his neck, it feeling stiff. Sad business, that. I wanted to be cremated. He sounded so wistful, a small glimpse at the human he had been before. I might go witness the killings, give myself some satisfaction at the bastard. Oh. Looking up from his administrative journal, Rindon was greeted with the sight of Walden barely holding his jaw from falling off, the skin stretching dangerously thin over it. A few of the nearby worksmiths had already shuffled away, but at this 2 of them had jumped and staggered backwards. "That is disgusting. Go see the blacksmiths and ask them to stick a nail in it." A grotesque click was heard, and he grimaced, concentrating on his tallies and silently glad he had forgone dinner in favour of sleep. "You're hilarious." Another click. "Tell you what, why don't I go ask the blacksmiths to shove a nail up your arse?" He stopped gesturing exactly where the nail was going and froze, hands falling to his sides. Frowning, Rindon looked to his companion to see what was wrong. He was staring beyond Rindon's shoulder, and he was clearly in shock. Curiosity overwhelming him, the elf turned, following his gaze, and dropped his tally board. The image presented to him made his body freeze. It was the Death Knight girl, and she was covered in blood. The dark colour was a sharp contrast to her pale form, which was already clothed in neutral tones. The blood didn't appear to be her own. It was from whatever she had hanging across her back. Anar Allah, it was a body. A small crowd gathered near her. She stood near the edge of the camp, having just arrived. She ignored the growing group and was staring at Rendon, uncaring of the dripping burden. No, she was staring behind him. "Mort," was all she said. The healers' tents were well lit with lanterns, spacious and now mostly empty. They had truly outdone themselves during and after the battle, tirelessly working to save each and every individual. Even a couple of Death Knights had been ushered in here by Tala to clean up a stump or wound tidied. She knew it wasn't necessary, but it was how she diverted her mind from dwelling on what she had witnessed come through those tent flaps. Overnight, patients were in the recovery tent across from the main hospital tent. She had not long gone in and done the rounds, all safe and well. She had happily sat down with her mug of tea, replaiting her grey streaked hair, chatting idly with Lork. This was soon interrupted by a small party led by young Rindon Firesworn, carrying a large bundle and closely followed by the Baron William Walden, and now she was looking at the mutilated body of the now former Corporal Mason and his murderer. The girl stood in a corner of the tent away from the group. Baron Walden was collapsed on a wooden stool, looking in her direction while she avoided his, everyone's gaze. Young Rindon Fireswarm was frowning down at the corpse, and Lork was bustling about with water and bandages to start cleaning him up in preparation for his funeral. The large Draenei was offering the only movement and source of noise in the tense silence of the tent. Tala was astounded when Dan had carried the body in with his entourage of two following slowly in his wake. Her eyes going straight to the blood, she immediately recognised the boy as dead, quashing the feeling of dread whenever she saw a deceased body, went to see to the girl, only to conclude that she was unharmed and simply retrieving Mason. "What is going on here?" she enunciated in her thick dwarven accent. It was one of the things that endeared Rindon to her. She was so motherly and fierce. Even that couldn't calm him right now, though it was the only thing stopping him from killing the Death Knight where she stood, or harming her at least, brutally. It would seem that our guest was the instigator of this horrid incident and sought to retrieve him for proper burial. His voice was quiet and very controlled. Not a few minutes before, the girl had quickly and quietly explained that she had recalled her reawakening and had set out to do right by the man she had unknowingly slaughtered. Rendon was barely containing his anger and rage. Her voice wasn't soft as a girl's should be, it was coarse and broken, like it had rusted almost. Her accent was almost indistinguishable through her staggered comment. He had moved forward. She gingerly handed over the body, Rendon slumping over the weight he now bore, not even stopping to think about how she carried a fully grown man and making straight for the healer's tent. not knowing his comrade had already passed. Right, well, thank you, dear, for retrieving our fallen brother. She was far too kind, nodding in the direction of the slayer. He didn't look, but he sensed her stiffen. Lorik moved on to tenderly cleaning Mason until it gestured for the group to move further down the tent. Near her, drawing a makeshift curtain around the bed, giving the vestige of some privacy for the deceased, she sat at the furthermost bed, legs dangling, looking to each of the people now sitting in silence. It was soon broken, and not by who she thought might be the one to break it. Cersei. Walden's voice was pleading and quiet. He leaned forward on his stool in the direction of his objective, hoping to garner her attention his way. Rendon's long ears perked, not having missed the mention of her name. It worked. Her eyes flickered to the Forsaken, expression heartbroken and grievous. Rendon had never seen a Death Knight show remorse before. Their expressions ranged from bloodthirsty to arrogant to cold and calculating. Never a morsel of human warmth shining through until now. He felt no pity. Little girl, please talk to me. It is you, isn't it? Her brow furrowed further, and she gave a nearly imperceptible nod. My dear Baron, you know this young lady? Talia was shocked and looked back and forth between the undead and the girl. Their gazes were so focused on each other, Rendon doubted either of them heard her, but he did. Walden, how do you know her? His tone was harsh and commanding, anger seeping through gritted teeth. Any pity he held for her from the previous day vanished with this one admittance of murder. Walden managed to tear his eyes, what was left of them, from her shadowed form in the corner to glance at him. Aye, I know her. We met by way of a mutual friend when she was human. He spoke the last word a whisper and ground his teeth. Rendon supposed he meant before she pledged her life and soul to the tyrant now plaguing Azeroth. How long ago was that? Kultir had said she joined the Iakaris branch over a year ago. How long did she train in death dealing before then? His mood grew darker as time went by. Sparing a glance at her, he saw that her eyes were wide and unfocused. By the light, Edmund. Her voice was sharp and cracked, ugly almost. She had stood up straighter, walking further into the light. The dead blood painting her was thrown into sharp relief against the pale backdrop of the tent. Walden nodded. Aye, lass. He searched high and low for you, my dear. Rendon had never heard his dead friend speak so tenderly, so kindly to someone. He was sarcastic and upfront, conniving and insulting. This was not the Walden he knew. This was Rendon talking to his sisters, Tal talking to her friends and loved ones. This was Walden talking to someone he truly cared for. Frowning, the Blood Elf felt his anger fade a fraction. Where is he? Talia and Rendon had evidently been forgotten about, simply acting as onlookers to this reunion. Walden rose and slowly took a step towards her. Little girl, I haven't seen him in a long time. He was distraught after what happened to you. He set off. I helped as much as I could, trying to listen out for a whisper of your whereabouts. But soon, the society, my people, they needed me to go back on duty. Talia's eyes were shining at the height of emotion. Rendon threw a quick glance to the curtained-off cot, felt it impossible in his callous state to see how these two dead beings could express such feelings. However, there was something odd about this whole situation. What do you mean, what happened to you? Walden, what happened to this girl? He demanded. This teary reconciliation was clawing at his temper, his patience more fragile than glass. I was there. She was. Oh, damn it. He nearly crumpled, Talia jumping as if to catch him. He caught himself. She was forced to become what she is now. He looked as distressed as he could with his partially rotted features. Rendon was sure his friend would cry if able to, so thick was he with emotion at the presence of this girl. She nodded twice at this absent-mindedly. Forced? In what manner? How is one forced into servitude? No. What happened to Edmund? Mort, I need you to tell me. The girl was looking hard and straight at Walden, or Mort as she seemed to refer to him. Silently reasoning that her question was more important, her voice was stronger now. She seemed older than the estimated 16 or so he had her down as. Walden didn't even look conflicted at the 2 lines of questioning. He chose her. Sirs, I haven't seen him in a long time. He left for the north, finding a small hint that newly turned knights were taken there. After Naxxramas was moved, he followed it. He was so sure you were in there. Rendon briefly recalled hearing the reports of that giant fortress travelling the Atlas north, causing panic to all those it passed over. Rumour had it that it was more terrifying a presence than Akros currently shading the camp. When had it moved? He couldn't recall right now. He watched as her composure briefly faltered, a frown furrowing her brow, and a whispered Naxxramas reached his long ears. She soon recovered to refocus sharply on Walden. Where is he? Each word almost seemed like a threat. Rendon rested one hand on the hilt of his sword. Cersei, you must understand, it's been some time since you returned. I've lost track of his whereabouts despite my best efforts. I last heard of him 1.5 years ago, making way to travel to the north. The girl faltered. She was stunned, mouth agape and shock teeming from her body. 1.5 years? Mort, it can't. No, it can't have been. It feels like, no, I did. I saw you only a few days ago. Her voice trailed off, face dressed in disbelief and mortification. Walden regarded her sadly, pitifully, his stance slumped in defeat. Oh, my dear little girl. He slowly stepped towards her, entering near her personal space. Rendon's mind was churning, something at the back of his mind nagging him. Walden gingerly placed 2 long skeletal hands on her slim shoulders. The elf couldn't place his finger on it. Her eyes were wide and trusting, but not innocent, staring upwards at Walden. Rendon involuntarily gasped. Naxxramas had moved 2 years ago. You were turned over 3 years ago now. She screamed. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this chapter of the Northrend Chronicles. As always, links will be found in the description below. And as always, remember, play to game and game to play.